Welcome, everybody. My name is Ben Smith. I'm joined by my two co-hosts, Abby Duty and Curtis Wister, the Diana Taurasi and Sue Bird to my Candace Parker. How are you guys
All
doing
right.
today?
Doing good.
Good. How are you, Ben?
I'm great. I'm great. We got a kind of a necessary topic we wanted to cover today, right? Is I know sometimes you get into lots of different things about life, and we know that for planning sessions we do a lot of envisioning a successful retirement, right?
Hmm.
And a lot of times our clients are talking about spending time with someone they love, and a lot of times maybe that's someone that they love, that maybe they love more than themselves. So as we're helping our clients to visualize the activities they want to do together, maybe it's travel, maybe it's visiting family, friends more, really just experiencing life more. So these coaching things, again, retirement visualization that we've covered in previous episodes, they're just wonderful exercises to really go through, because you can see the energy, right? We're sitting down with people and you can see that reignited passion of, hey, this is a new day and this is something we can do together, and finding that purpose, because now they can start doing things they've always dreamed of. But somewhere down the road, right, is maybe in retirement, it's maybe a year out, 10 years out, 20 years out. One of us on our team gets a call from our clients of someone we work with, and it's the call that we don't like, right? Is they're broken up, they can't get the words out, and maybe it's their husband, maybe it's their wife, significant other, their kid, someone important in their life has just passed away. And it really just shatters their world because of all these dreams and goals and the things that they visualize. So a lot of their plans feel destroyed. But we all kind of want to make sure we're living our lives, and how do we move on? So should we move on, right? And how do we do that without feeling tremendous guilt for being happy in the face of loss? So that was I think us kind of talking about that is, we're presented with it. We say, geez, we're not counselors, we're not therapists. It's not what we do, but we want to make sure that we're addressing that. So that's the topic we want to cover in today's podcast. So again, as we said, we're frontline, really seeing these things happen all the time. And we want to interview someone that's really been trained to help people through this type of event. So our guest today is a licensed clinical professional counselor, and she's also a registered art therapist. She has a private practice in Waterville, Maine. It's called Conscious Art Therapy. And she's also a teacher, an artist, and workshop and retreat facilitator. So I'd like to welcome Bodhi Simpson to the Retirement Success in Maine podcast. So Bodhi, appreciate you coming on.
Hello, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on. We wanted to obviously dig into the topic, but we thought obviously with our show, one of the things we want to do is always just introduce you, right? As obviously we did a blind request of you coming on today, and got you involved in terms of what we're trying to do. But we want to make sure that our audience knows you, right? Is hear a little bit about your path, kind of getting to this point today. So maybe you could just start with where did you grow up, and kind of then your kind of path maybe towards school.
Sure. Well, I grew up in central Maine in the Waterville, Fairfield area. And, when I started school, I started with art classes in college. I always expressed myself really easily through art. And so took art classes and eventually psychology and mental health classes. And while I was taking those classes, I really started to understand some of the deeper mental health issues going on within my family system. And, it just kind of opened me up to this whole reality and this whole world, which really, the journey to become an art therapist was really a journey of my own healing, and realizing that through everything that I've been through in my life, I felt I had a strength that maybe I could offer others, teach them maybe something that I learned that would help. So that was my journey.
Gotcha. So you're essentially saying, right, is, hey, you went through something in your life where you kind of felt the need that to heal. I'm expressing myself in lots of different ways, whether it be art or,
Exactly.
so can you talk a little bit about then, like, how did you choose that, right? Is because, again, you kind of have the art background already, and you said, hey, this is something personal I went through. How did you then say, I could do anything in my life? Why did I choose to kind of blend those two kind of professions together and then say, hey, I can make a go of it, and this is something I want to do full time?
That's a great question. So I actually started, my undergrad was not in art. It was in ended up being in mental health and human services.
Yeah.
And I, was helping people, but I was missing the art. I was like, man, I'm just not really feeling fulfilled. And so I actually was applying to clinical psychology programs because it felt like the next step. And then I came upon a field called clinical art therapy, which I'd actually never even heard of before. And it was the combination of art and mental health and psychology and human development. And so when I found the field, I just had that feeling in my heart of like, oh my gosh, this is who I am. There's a job that's just who I am. And so I feel like I just kind of like followed the steps, as far as what felt right in the moment to find my way.
It's kind of a nice feeling when you find your tribe, right? Is that,
Oh, totally.
it's like now I know where I belong, and there's a piece there that you don't feel that unsettled. Is this right? And I think we always kind of question it, regardless of even when you find it, but so
Yeah.
nice to hear of, hey, this is what I'm meant to be and what I'm meant to do, and those sorts of things. Can you talk a little bit about Maine, right? So growing up in central Maine, I know from all of us and a lot of the guests we've interviewed that are from here, is there's always this gravity to leave, right? Is that there's always this pull. You can go be in the city, go to Boston or New York or further. You can go do lots of stuff. And again, Maine, when you're in it, is very uncool. And sometimes it's cooler to kind of be somewhere else. But there's this gravity to come back. So you can talk about, obviously you didn't kind of express that part, but why did you choose Maine to kind of be educated here, but also why stay?
Yeah, so I started my education in Maine at University of Maine in Augusta because it was close, and I'd only been in Maine, so I was too scared to go anywhere else.
Sure.
And then I did like what you're talking about. I did my grad school in Massachusetts, got the heck out of here, and I didn't like it. I feel like it's such a fast-paced life in the city, and there were so many therapists, and I really felt that Maine was in need. I mean, there were like two art therapists that I had ever known of in Maine at that time. I'm sure there were a few more, but I felt like Maine needed this. So I also love the pace here. It's beautiful. It's flowing, slower pace. So that's why I came back.
Awesome. Can you talk a little bit? So obviously you come back at that point. Can you talk towards your kind of path towards your own private practice? Again, as you said, you're not only seeing really two other, practitioners that are doing art therapy, but what's been unique about your work with your clients in the areas of counseling that you're focusing on? And then how are people finding you?
Okay. So actually most people pick me because I look nice on the Psychology Today ad, and they don't even read that I'm an art therapist, and they come in, and when I let them know I'm an art therapist, they give me that like deer in headlights look of like, I'm not creative. I don't do art. And so I am trained in talk therapy. And so for many of my clients, the biggest thing is really helping people find the method of expression that's most comfortable for them. So what I'll say is I'll just kind of invite them to, maybe trying, as we check in, trying a few different techniques and modalities using creativity if they're open to it, because sometimes we don't realize how we express ourselves until we try different ways. So a big part of my job is just to help people open to being vulnerable and to find compassion for themselves as they explore something new. And the reason I love art therapy is because, well, first of all, I feel like most people aren't really taught how to express their feelings. They weren't raised in a family that knew how to do that, and not their parents' fault. Their parents weren't raised in that, method either. So, helping people to really express that raw feeling. So it's not about creating something that's beautiful that you're going to hang on your wall. A lot of times it's really kind of scary looking. Getting at the raw emotion, and then once you've expressed something, it's outside of you, so you don't even have to know what it is you expressed or why. And once it's outside of you, then together we can witness this visual expression of an invisible emotion. And my role is to help guide people to build a relationship to what they expressed and how it connects back to them. And so when when your emotional state is in a seen in a witness perspective, you're a little bit removed from it emotionally, so you can kind of see the patterns and the beliefs a little bit more clearly. You can gain perspective to see other ways through where maybe you wouldn't have when we're just kind of stuck talking about it over and over. So I feel like in my first 7 years in Maine, it was really just educating everybody about what the heck art therapy was, the power of creative expression. But now there are like TED Talks about it, and so many art therapists. I mean, there's not a ton of us still in, at least in Central Maine. There's a few more in Southern Maine, and I'm sure there's a whole new force coming in. So nowadays you can actually find a lot of research on it. Where when I was starting, it was more like we knew it was helpful, but we didn't really have the research behind it.
And do you feel like, and as kind of a follow up to that, is do you feel like that maybe as we're kind of getting into the baby boomer generation more of kind of getting closer to retirement, that there's maybe a little bit more openness to that in terms of like the whole expressive nature here, that because I can just, you can hear maybe like echoes of past generations, and especially ones that are, the Great Depression and World War II, and just a lot of suppression in terms of feelings and thoughts and in relation to your worries and your fears, that I don't know if, to me, observing kind of, and we're thus working with this population, it feels like we're now, because we ask a lot of why, like, why do you want to do this? And, you're visualizing, or you want to go here, you want to do that. And you're getting to why. And that conversation happens much more quickly, I think, today than it did maybe even 10 or 15 years ago. Because before, maybe it took you a year to 5 years to even get to that point that they trusted you enough to express themselves that way.
Oh, definitely. Yes, it's much more mainstream to see a counselor than even 10 years ago. I feel like there's a lot more, you're seeing it more everywhere with all ages. People are talking about it with their friends, I'm going to see my counselor. And it's just, yes, much more accepted today than it used to be.
It's not necessarily a sign of weakness, right? Is that, because I think before it was you're weak if you're going to get help, and you're admitting that you're weak. And now it's like, well, no, I am struggling with something, but it's a sign of strength that I'm actually vulnerable enough to say that I am, and then go seek help to get over this, or maybe not get over it, but maybe just express it, or maybe just to understand it better, or whatever that may be. But, from kind of, I know we're tangential with our kind of services in the population, but people are people too. So again, from our side, that's what we're seeing a whole lot more of.
Yeah, emotions are information, and they're just meant to be felt and moved through us. But I find people hold on to their feelings for 30 years, and they've never learned how to open.
Yeah, and we use this example a bunch, is we just see in terms of, and again, even light stuff, happy stuff, things that people said, I always wanted to do something, and they just, then even their spouse have said, you've never told me that. Like, not just the pain points, which probably would be very difficult, of, hey, this is something I'm hurt by, or you did this to me, and how do I actualize it and reference it back to you? All those kind of, those things I could understand more, but even just hey, I was really excited if we could go on a trip to Italy, and I always wanted to do it, but I can't even tell them that because I don't want to offend them. And what if they're unhappy with me, and all those things back and forth. So many barriers. So that's what I think, Bodhi, today with you, is I wanted to have us kind of discuss a little bit more. And I know we're going to focus on grief here in a second, but all of these, right, there's a barrier to expression. And I'm really interested in how you kind of tackle that. So I want to ask one more question about you, Bodhi, in terms of your role. But what do you find that you love about your job? Again, I know that you say, like, hey, I kind of found peace with, this is what I'm meant to be, but what do you love most?
Oh, such a good question. I feel like I really just love holding space for people to open up to themselves. I love helping people learn how to heal themselves. It's very fulfilling.
So, because really it's on the other side of it, right? Is like, you see pain, and then you kind of get to the bridge, and you can...
Right, you see it transform into beauty. Yeah.
Because I think from our side, we're pretty jealous, because a lot of our financial plans are like 30 years. Like, how do we know if we got success or not? Well, let's wait 30 years or 50 years or 60 years, and then we'll tell you if you got it or not. But, so it's like, well, wait and see, and then we'll know if we did a great job. I mean, the good part about yours is I think you see a little bit more immediate feedback, which is great.
Yes, definitely.
Awesome. Well, I want to shift to, again, this idea that the title of today's show is Rediscovering Self-Purpose After Losing a Loved One, right? Because again, sometimes our identity is maybe us as a couple, or maybe a relationship with a child, or, that you kind of identify as maybe a family, right? And not necessarily as kind of individual there. So I want to talk about a grieving process, right? So let's say it's day one, and I'm just going to use I'll just use just an example here. A wife loses her husband of 40 years, just because we see that a lot, right? It's usually the husband that passes away before the wife, and usually it's a long-standing relationship. They're inseparable, they're in love. Can you talk about the various steps, like when that happens, again, day one, this person just lost their loved one, what various steps must that person face as they address their grief towards losing a loved one?
This is a really good question, because I feel like when people are going through this process, that's what they're asking me. It's like, okay, what stages have I been through, and what's the next one?
Yeah.
Like we're just looking for structure around this like really loose, universal experience of grief. There are different stages of grief that, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross developed, which was like denial and acceptance and anger and depression and bargaining. And so people will come in and say, well, I haven't gotten angry yet. Like, when's that one coming? And the truth is that, all of these different stages of grief and loss, they intermingle, and you may not experience all of them. So it really is unique to the situation. There are many different types of losses, which we can talk about a little bit later. But a big piece of it is really taking the time to experience the pain of the loss, and also to kind of like realign yourself to your environment first, because that's just so much change just in your daily routines, in your sense of self, and then we go to the finding meaning and new purpose and direction. And there's a time limit on that.
Yeah. When people are going through the grieving process, right, sometimes it might feel like it's going on forever, like they're just going to be stuck in this process forever. And loved ones may want to urge them, like, it's time to move on, it's time to get over it. Like, why can't you just get out of this rut that you're in? So is it okay to be stuck for a while? Certainly, like you were just saying, there's no handbook on a time limit or anything. But I think sometimes, is it okay to be there for a while, to be grieving for a while?
Yeah, I think this is a great question, because I do hear that from a lot of people. My friends keep telling me to move on, or I should start dating, or I should, get out there. And no, every situation with grief really is complicated. It can be a little complicated, or it can be a traumatic loss if it's, somebody who's passed suddenly versus somebody who's been ill for a very long time. And with grief, what we're experiencing is that sense of separation. So that loss of connection to your best friend, to your loved one, to your support system. And like Ben mentioned, sometimes you feel you love even more than yourself, more than life itself. And so, but the truth is, we don't want to keep ourselves stuck, so 10 years is a long time to stay stuck in the process. So, we do want to express and find ways to move through the pain.
And can I ask a follow-up there, Bodhi, in terms of, I think some of it from an outsider perspective, right? And I think it maybe feels a little bit different based on maybe how much life we've lived with that person as well. Because I think, I have a friend that was saying, and I was talking to them about this episode, and they said, oh my God, I got a girlfriend that's 43 years old, and she just lost her husband suddenly. Right. And it's like, all of a sudden, again, the same thing is like, at some point, what's the process? But it feels like, seeing as a loved one, kind of seeing that person struggle, and maybe not just the timeline, that there's some timeline to get through things, but there's just not progress. It's like, okay, well, maybe you're just stuck in the anger stage. You're just always so angry with them, and you're just expressing that all the time. And why did they do this? And why did they leave me? And why I could have done this with you, and all of those feelings. But it feels like that sometimes it's just circular, right? As it just kind of keeps going and going, and it makes them feel like, to everybody else, as an angry person, And those then around them go, well, I don't want to spend my time with an angry person. So it distances you even more. Right. And I think that's in Maine anyway, we kind of get this physical distancing as it is because we are more rural. We can be more spread out. Winters can be hard here. So, connection is so important. But I guess that's my question to you is like, how would I maybe just kind of get in there? Like, how would I kind of help kind of maybe suggest to them about here's where we are and try to see them advance?
Mm-hmm. Well, the most important thing is really to validate. I feel like so many times we're trying to, at least that's what I'm hearing from my clients, where they want me to get out, they want me to do this. And I don't want to tell them how I feel. I don't want them to, bear the weight of my sadness. So I think the more you can just accept how they're feeling, not necessarily try to change it, but at the same time, offer suggestions, kind of gently supporting them, ways you can, things you could do together, or maybe helping them find some resources if they're ready to talk to somebody else. But I feel like in the beginning, when people are hurting, the most important thing is just validating.
Mm-hmm.
So Bodhi, you just kind of teed this up for me here. I kind of want to follow up. I know Ben was just talking about sort of as an outsider or that loved one to try to help push someone along. Kind of how does that work? And, if you get to that point where, I'm sitting back and it's not me who just lost my spouse, but say I really want, friend XYZ to really go seek help or seek someone like yourself, kind of how, I guess, when do you think that's kind of appropriate? And again, I know it's different for everyone. And then just kind of how does that work, seeking out someone like yourself?
That is such a great question that I feel like a lot of people, it seems so easy, but when you're in it, it can feel so, you just feel so lost sometimes. So, as a support person, I would always recommend offering maybe to help them find some therapists in the area, or if they have insurance, you could even have them, or you could call their insurance company and find out who's in network in the area. You could give them the numbers, and if they're just not able to call, you could even, I've had family members call me to see if I have openings and even set up the initial session. Sometimes they'll have a friend or loved one bring them to the session. The other thing is, with that, some people come to counseling right away because they know they're going to need support. Some people come after the first year. They feel like they really need a year or two to really come out of that shock state and be ready to process. And some people I see 5 or 10 years later. But I really feel that, the sooner people can come, the sooner they can just face the truth and move through. But there's also Facebook groups nowadays, so if people aren't quite ready for that, some of them are a little more positive than others. I've had clients say, they've joined like a widow Facebook support group where everybody's kind of just talking about how sad they are. And this person found one that was more positive about okay, and how do we move through this? So maybe just helping them navigate that piece would be helpful. Or sometimes there's somebody in your family or somebody that's been through a similar situation. I feel like that's really helpful if they could just talk to somebody that has been through it.
Sure.
So.
Can I ask related to that too, Bodhi, because I guess we kind of talked about the connection and communication is so key, but if I'm again in Curtis's situation of, hey, my friend is really going through this and I really care, but how can I how do I just what's some tips you can offer around pointing them towards, geez, maybe some counseling services might be the thing to do, because it feels like there could be an overreach, right? Is like, hey, you're trying to push yourself on me. You don't understand what I'm going through, or you don't think I can do this myself. And I can see where if I'm trying to offer assistance, I want to do so without being, again, I want to validate what they're going through, as you just said, but I want to do it without kind of going backwards and then feeling like, well, I'm betraying them or I'm insulting them by offering this. How would you kind of approach that conversation?
Yeah, this is a great question. It is, and sometimes people have a lot of beliefs against counseling. They've been brought up, I don't need help. I've always been there for other people. I hear that all the time. I'm the support person. I don't need support. I feel like it's really just, if it's somebody you truly care about, stay present with them and continue offering, not forcing it on them, but just checking in with them and seeing if they're ready. or letting them know when you're ready, let's do this together, or, give it some, you want to really respect where they're at in their process, because, when people are feeling forced, they do have a tendency to put walls up and close in. So it tends to be an intuitive process, but remembering to check in when they maybe seem fine.
Yeah, because again, it can obviously, and everyone can just put up that facade too, and it looks like they're okay, but you can see signs too sometimes of that they're not maybe doing okay, and they're putting just a really kind of good face on it. So yeah, I like that as a point of, hey, even just checking in and giving them the airtime, and just maybe just shut down in terms of your side of the conversation and listen and just see what comes back, and not just kind of just don't fill. Right. So yeah, I want to talk a little bit about, so kind of shifting to getting people towards the counseling side and kind of what sort of kind of process to go through. Can we talk a little bit about the counseling experience, right? So as somebody that maybe has not gone through counseling, and, and to kind of hear about it, is, of course, everyone's got the stereotype, right? It's the, the James Gandolfini and Dr. Melfi, or it's the person on the couch and someone's got glasses on taking notes and go, Can you talk a little bit about what that experience really is like? So again, what's from the moment that they come in the door, like what does a session look like, and what does it look like over time, and how does that evolve? And again, maybe it's from you with your art side, or even just towards the talking perspective. Just let's break that down so we can kind of get over the kind of the myth and dispel that part.
I love this, because every time I see it on TV, I'm like, oh my gosh, or the therapist is like telling them what their problem is, or telling them what they need to do. Or the most important thing really is finding somebody you feel like you can talk to. So what I always tell people is, go through pictures, see if you have a connection with that person, even from a photo, or read a little bit about them. Don't just necessarily do a blind. It's like shopping. You want to find, like a doctor too, you want to find somebody you feel you resonate with, and as a therapist, our role is really to establish safety. So you would come into my office or somebody else's office. Here I have 2 couches. You would sit across from me, and I have, like I said, I have different tools to help people know where to start, because a lot of times people will come in and they'll be crying and they'll say, I don't even know where to start. I don't even know what to say, or I don't do this. I don't do feelings. So with art therapy, a lot of times initially, or only, we are very basic. It might be something as simple as having them choose an image blindly, and they share what it reminds them of. And basically what it does is it opens up a doorway into a story, to an experience. So, our role is just to be able to connect with you and help you connect more deeply with your truth. And a good therapist will not have you leave the office worse than you came in. In the beginning, sometimes it can feel that way, because I always say, I like taking the lid off the trash can, especially if it's somebody who hasn't really dealt with. Sometimes I'm dealing with people, like I said, 10 years ago, they lost somebody and they never once talked about it. Just put a lid on it and moved on. Yeah. So it can feel like it's, you're much more vulnerable in the beginning, but the goal would be that we check in, we go where you feel comfortable going, and then we bring it around to have a sense of what can you do moving forward. So kind of like a grounding practice to work on moving forward. And so in the work that I do with my clients is I help teach them really simple tools to connect more deeply to themselves, so that when they leave, they are not disconnected and triggered.
So I guess my question to you, Bodhi, is then, okay, every session that you're going through, because again, from a theatrical, cinematic experiences, I sit down with you, I blah my feelings at you, and then all of a sudden I come to this really deep realization about myself that I never would have come to before. But what I hear you saying is, it's maybe just even that I just feel a little bit better, right? Is that maybe that doing a lot of little better is equal to feeling a lot better over time. Maybe it's not that I need to, maybe I don't realize something for myself. Maybe I do, but more of that I'm feeling that it's more of kind of feeling something better than what I was feeling kind of coming in. Would that be true?
Yes, I love what you're saying. So a lot of it is people come in and they're holding and they don't know how to move this through them. And really, this space is a container for you to bring your stuff and release it. We can learn from it. You leave the heavy stuff here. We take little glimmers of positive with you, what you've learned, what you want to hold on to, and then you feel lighter when you leave. And so it's this kind of clearing process. And it may take a while because it's a process. There's more to be uncovered. But you're right, it's about finding space to honor your truth so that you can release and feel better.
And also be open to being led, right? I think here too, right? Is that, because I guess what I would see is, if from the people we work with, but also maybe personally, is if I walk in, I feel like maybe there's an expectation of, I need to just immediately get trust, immediately throw this out there, let you assemble my puzzle pieces, put it back together for me so that I can, so it feels like there's a whole lot of, again, going in myth here of, I need to do all the work. Because it's me that needs to be fixed. Again, I'm just using maybe that, and that I need to do all this to help you fix me, like kind of the mechanic side. So, but again, what you're kind of expressing is that's not the case.
No, it's more about coming in and finding ways to open, like I mentioned before, open to being vulnerable and loving yourself enough as you would any other human you care about, to take care of yourself and find ways to heal.
Great. So kind of shifting gears a little bit to talk about Mainers specifically. So have you noticed anything that is specific with Mainers when they're going through grief? And if so, have you adapted your practice in any way? And do you see a difference between Southern Maine and Central Maine? I know they're pretty close, but culturally they can be pretty different.
Yes. Well, I mean, in Maine, on its own, we are more rural, and so I do find that people, it's easy for them to kind of withdraw and not reach out, and they aren't as connected. And I do have some colleagues that travel. Actually, they go to people's homes. That is not something I do, but it is common in this area.
I want to ask a question that maybe this is a hard question, Bodhi, is I think from even just something to ask, because this is something actually the three of us in our team here, we had one of our clients had committed suicide last summer, right? And it's like, again, from the mental wellness perspective, and as a professional relationship with him, and I feel like we had a trusting relationship, but still there's no way to know, and all of a sudden you don't know how he's suffering and his lows and all that, because maybe he's just bringing the best to you. But it obviously with people as they're maybe even grieving, or maybe they're just solo aging, right, is they're just looking at this and saying, hey, I'm having feelings of suicide, right? I'm lonely, maybe I feel like I'm a burden to my family. Maybe I've lost that person, and I'm saying, what is my purpose? And so again, not I'm getting so low in my life that I'm really kind of thinking about this whole, like, you hear the quote, and actually people even say this almost in jest, but it says, like, if I get to that point in my life, I'll end myself, or I can't wait to see my spouse again, or so like insinuations, and not necessarily like they're overtly kind of doing that. But can we talk about maybe for those that as we're aging, is that normal to kind of maybe even have those feelings? Are they maybe expressing them externally? But when, I guess some of my concern is that, and then I'll let you go there, then I'll ask the follow-up, Sarah.
And I would answer by saying, yes, it's completely normal to have those kind of thoughts and feelings.
Because I guess from our end is, okay, we hear it, and you kind of wonder from an outsider perspective is whether they're relaying that to their kids, or they're to their friends, or to people they know and they love and they trust. Does that then insinuate a responsibility, right? Does it's like, okay, I heard this. Again, you're sharing information with me, and am I the only one that you've shared this information with? And what's my responsibility right now that I have the information to make sure that you're safe, that to make sure that what you just shared with me, that I don't see that and I don't want to dismiss it, right? And I don't want to just say, hey, what I just heard you say, and you're just joking, and that's a big deal. So can you kind of describe that of kind of again, an external perspective, you hear it, how would you kind of advise people to engage with that?
Yeah, well, in our profession, we're mandated reporters, so it's kind of built into what we do. But as somebody who's human and who cares about somebody else, there's nothing wrong with saying what you just said. Have you shared this with other people in your family? Do they understand how you feel? Because a lot of times people just need somebody. I have a lot of people say, I wish somebody would just read my thoughts, or I would never come out and say that I need this. Why don't they I just want them to get it. So sometimes you can just be that caring human that notices that somebody else is suffering, and just by you validating and asking that question could help them. Or you could, offer to make a referral if you wanted, or get them some names or things like that.
So you made the point, Bodhi, about again the kind of being a mandated reporter, right? So you have somebody express that in your session. Well, can you explain what that means? So again, I got to express that, and somebody said that to me. Well, who are we reporting to, right? And what does that mean? Because again, I think what the internal battle as an external person, again, a friend, a son, a daughter, a cousin, whatever, is that I'm betraying your trust. That it feels like I'm selling you out to somebody that you don't trust. And now am I burning that bridge? And I'm actually making it worse and not better.
Yeah, so in the therapy world, we, there's a difference between I'm feeling this way versus I have a plan to do this, this, and this. Mm-hmm. So our role is to help people express themselves. And when they, we have people express really heavy emotions all the time. That's what our job is. Mm-hmm. But if it got to the point where we really felt like somebody was at risk of hurting themselves or hurting somebody else, we are mandated reporters, and we're required to report that. Now for you, I'm not necessarily recommending that you report it to anybody, but just being caring enough to ask them the question, are you okay? And is there anything I can do to help? Could I call somebody or refer you? Or sometimes just asking, are you okay, is enough. You don't have to be a clinician and assess it, but just caring enough to notice.
Yeah, because I think from our end, Bodhi, is, again, as a frontline person sometimes, is that maybe you're the only person that they do trust. I don't know, right? And so I don't want to assume that they have a circle. And so, but what I hear you saying is, if you start hearing a plan of, oh yeah, well, this is how it's going to happen or whatever, at that point, then we're kind of elevating it to, we need to report it to family or maybe the local police station or something along those lines.
Yeah, I guess it would be something you'd have to decide if that was the step you wanted to make. Yep. It's hard because I hear what you're saying. You want to respect where people are at, and although sometimes people aren't emotionally stable and they do need the extra support.
Sure.
It's hard. I mean, you guys aren't licensed therapists, but you're playing a role. You're there, hearing people's lives, and you care about them, and you build a relationship with them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Bodhi, I want to kind of change gears here. So can you just kind of share with us, generally some success stories? We love stories. I think our listeners love to hear these stories about, I think all of us have gone through this kind of hypothetical situation. We've talked about this episode of a loved one of 40 years, your spouse passes away, or someone who's gone through this, just kind of someone who's kind of gone through that type of loss and gotten over it and, gone through this grief process. And can you just kind of share some insight or stories there?
Sure. I have one in mind. As a woman who lost her husband suddenly right as they were both getting ready to retire, and they had all kinds of trips planned, everything they've waited their whole lives to do, and parties, and just suddenly he died. It wasn't seen, it was just happened. And so luckily, she reached out for a session. I believe it was about 2 months after he died. And we met initially about once a week. And then we eventually, after about 10 months, we moved to like once every other week, once a month. But really, the first year was really helping her, holding space for her to grieve, helping her to set boundaries where she needed to, like helping her to like listen to what felt right to her versus what other people wanted for her, but also helping her to notice when she needed more support to be able to speak about that. And really it was, for the first year, it was helping her to adjust to each season. Every season she realized there was just different losses every season because of what she had done with her husband and her children. And everybody through the first year was encouraging her to, I think after like a month, clean out the house, get his stuff out of there. You need to start dating, all these things. And it wasn't until about a year that she was willing and ready to even go through his items. And it wasn't until about a year that we started doing some more of the creative approaches. So around a year for her, she was, I feel like, coming into acceptance and ready to do something creative, ready to get some juices flowing to find a new meaning and find a new purpose. And so at that time, we did a lot of work around memorializing like memories that she wanted to hold on to. And she would take his clothes and make quilts and pillows for her family, painted her bedroom, kind of redid so it's, I think the biggest thing about grief work is also not moving on, but building a new connection in a new way to your loved ones. So that was a big piece of our work as well, is how do I open up to, yes, they're not here in physical form, but what does death mean to me, and how do I still connect? And how do I really, at that point, after a year, it was like, how do I really learn to hold space for my grief and my sadness and my anger and bring in the light and the future? And really for her, the loss triggered every loss she'd ever had since she was young, trauma. So it almost felt like for her, it gave her an opportunity not only to heal her grief, but to heal a lifetime of losses. And then, so really it's like this blank slate as she moves forward, where she's sad, she's grieving, and she's hopeful. She's both. So I think that's really the best case scenario where we can come back into balance in a new way.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. And one thing that we kind of hear a lot, and we try to tackle almost in every episode, and not in a thematic way, but it just kind of comes up, is the question, is it too late? And what I want to just kind of pose you to that question is, even later in life, so maybe I'm in my 80s or 90s and I lose that person, and I'm going through that process. And one of the things you're describing as the outcome of the process, which is what we're trying to get to in this show, is, hey, and again, I in a way, I kind of allergic to the whole getting over it, right? Is like how do you don't, right? You don't get over the loss of that person. And there's just really no great way to express that, though. But I think from that end is, what about the person that is that late 80s and that, they're closer towards maybe end of life than the beginning of life, but they're not so close that they can't have hope, and they can't have a kind of purpose and things that they want to still accomplish going forward. So I guess my question really is, first, is it different in terms of that, about the process and kind of finding purpose after death from that loved one? And are you still seeing people are able to do that, right? Are they able to do that, even though it's like, hey, we all might pass away tomorrow, but more likely I've kind of already accepted that when I am 90, that more likely that may happen as an outcome. But mm-hmm. There's still life and joy to experience.
Yeah, with, experiencing a death at that age, it's like everything you thought was going to happen is now changed. Mm. And I actually saw a lady, she was about 94, very lively and healthy. And she said, I feel like my life never really started until I was about 75 when my husband died. And she said, I loved him, but she said between 75 and the time that I saw her at 94, she stepped into parts of herself that she never even knew she wanted to, or things from when she was a child that she just didn't do during the, the years married and with children. And so I guess, there's loss, and there's also opportunity for finding new aspects of yourself and new aspects of life at all times, at all points. It's just perspective, I suppose.
Love it.
So Bodhi, one thing we like to ask our guests on every show, gonna completely change it up on you here. So the name of our show is the Retirement Success in Maine podcast, which you knew. So we want to look ahead to your retirement. I guess, what is retirement success? Like, what do you think that'll mean for you, and how do you envision your retirement when you get to that point in your life?
Such a great question. I feel like, something I guess we don't take time to think about much.
Right.
I feel like I want to make a plan, but I also want to be open to the twists and turns along the way. I want to have a lot of fun. Around the time retirement comes, I want to be present to what's coming or what is, and kind of just, because of the work that I do, I know that so much of life we really can't plan. So it's like making a plan, but allowing it to shift as I go. Then I would be happy. That'd be great.
Love it.
Great.
Well, Bodhi, thank you so much for coming on our show today. It's again, I know it's a heavy topic, and I know a lot of the work you do is not just obviously on the grieving side. There's other aspects of your business as well, and in your work with people. So, but again, we thought as a need is there's just a heavy need for that, with these conversations to happen in the open, to happen with understanding and human feeling, and so I can't thank you enough for coming on and doing that with us, because again, it's just, I think as we've talked about it, and even just as we experience with our clients, we even got to grieve, right? I think you have these connections with these people, and if you're doing, I think in our sense, if you're doing it right, you care. You love these people. You want to see them succeed, and you want to see, and you kind of see that, things change in their lives, and you kind of grieve that too. So thank you for that, because I think it's really meaningful of what you're doing, how you're touching people, and the ability to come on and share is really great. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me. Hopefully somebody will benefit from this conversation.
Hey guys, just want to insert something real quick. So in our conversation with Bodhi Simpson today, we did talk about suicide a little bit, and one of the things we're talking about was resources. We connected with Bodhi afterwards, and kind of as she was thinking and listening to it, and kind of want to make sure that we made a point. And that point was really, if you are concerned about even yourself or somebody else that having suicidal thoughts and being serious about that, is to reach out to the Maine Crisis Hotline. So we want to make sure that we inserted that into today's show, because it is a very serious issue, and we want to make sure that people have the resources they need. So you can call the Maine Crisis Hotline number at 1-888-568-1112. So obviously we have a lot of people that are not in the state of Maine as well, right? So if you are listening to this and you know of somebody, there is a national suicide prevention lifeline that you can use. That phone number, as well as 1-800-273-TALK. And TALK is 8255. So 1-800-273-8255. Also, you can go to the website suicidepreventionlifeline.org. And there is a lifeline chat where you can chat with a real crisis counselor online. So again, some resources. We just want to make sure that, that obviously we're having a conversation, really taking it seriously. We'd rather be taking it overly seriously than being more cavalier on it. So I think those are really important points. So we just want to make sure that before we kind of get to our wrap up today, that we were highlighting that for you. So really fantastic to have Bodhi Simpson on the show today. A course from having someone that's, again, the licensed clinical counselor, right? And knowing someone that is counseling people on a day-to-day basis, and this is what they do. And talking about grief and kind of as we see it as, all of a sudden, you have a financial plan of, well, we're going to do this, and then we're going to spend that, and we're going to then, here's how we're going to live our life. And then that gets shaken up when the person is now, not the couple anymore. They're still working with us. Yeah. And, what's the plan now? And if they don't know themselves, and how are we going to help from an external perspective? So kind of, again, good to kind of hear her process, hear how she helps people, and then how we can maybe reverb that or reincorporate it. So of course, with every episode, we like to, of course, kind of get our highlighters out, and really just go through and say, here's what I learned today. I'm going to have Curtis kind of lead off here with, what did you take away from Bodhi's conversation with us today?
Yeah. A piece that stuck out to me, Ben, was she was talking about, I think, just kind of, getting through, and again, we're trying not to be like, oh, just get over it, but getting through that grief process and things you can do. And she brought up, I think she had a widow she discussed that had joined a Facebook group. That was something that I had never even thought about, the technology there. And that, it circles back to our conversation we had a little while back with John Deal about technology and aging and retirement. And for someone to be able to connect with potentially so many people who have been through something so similar from their couch, to be able to, share stories and experiences, and how are you getting through it, and how can I, doing this really helped, or doing that didn't, kind of outside of, someone like Bodhi and her services. I thought that was a really good piece to think about that could help.
Yeah, and I think traditionally what you would have seen, right, is like these widows grieving groups, right? Is you'd have them come together, and they would, they'd sit around and have conversations, share kind of what they're experiencing. Mm-hmm. But talk about, again, we're a remote state as a group. Right. Right. What if there's not one near me? Mm-hmm. What if I have mobility issues as I'm aging and I can't get out of the house to experience that? Maybe I have no outlet anymore.
Right.
And using technology, as you said, Curtis, to do, whether a Facebook group or something along those lines, I don't even have to be expressive. I can just listen and hear.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Right? Exactly.
So yep. I can just see what other people are going, oh, man, that you're like me, and I'm feeling this way too. So just validation of feeling is, I think, something Bodhi was talking about a lot. Mm. And I think that's what you're saying is really great, because that Facebook group allows that validation to happen. So yeah. A really, really good point there. Abby, from our show today, what did you take away from Bodhi's conversation with us?
Yeah, I really enjoyed her talking about her process of, especially when she was doing art therapy, about how she has people just put out on paper whatever they're feeling. And once it's just out of you, you can deal with it. And it just becomes a little less personal, a little easier to deal with. And I think it's so great, and such a great process to use when working through something so heavy and so traumatic that, you don't even know where to start. So I found it really interesting.
And I'll point that out to you, Abby, is, of course, that would be the thing of, hey, our whole profession in financial planning is get all those goals out on paper, track your progress towards the goals. Sure. And if it's on paper, it'll happen. If you just never tell anybody what you want to do and aligning the money to it, then it never happens. So, which is kind of cool. She's doing the exact same thing from a counseling side as what we're doing on the money side of again, get it out and get it out, put it down, and let's now deal with it together, because we can do that independently. So again, she kind of did that witness side. Really great. So I thought that was a really good point. Mm-hmm. For me, again, I really like the conversation about the outside perspective, right? And I know I kind of hit her a couple of times with that about, hey, because a lot of our show listeners are really the boomers that are really the 50 and older to 65-year-old group, right? So a lot of our listeners are really kind of seeing that my parents right now are going through it. They might have just lost somebody, or I'm looking forward and they will go through it. So when they're going through this, how do I help? How do I be a resource? How do I not be judgmental? How do I avoid terms like get over it, or don't do this, mom, or don't do that, dad, or just go do this, right? Yeah. It's just this kind of being forceful and pushing and not validating feelings. So I really like that she's able to address this, being there, checking in, giving opportunities for them to be vulnerable, and then if it's ever appropriate or they need more help, is getting them in contact with a counselor and doing it in a safe way, and not being forceful about it. You're just going to go see a counselor and you got to get over this thing. right?
Yeah.
Is really kind of going through the process together. So I think that's an important thing. I think our listeners could really take away as a good validation of something that they may go through, or maybe they might go through themselves at some point. So having more outsider perspective might help with that. So again, Bodhi Wood did a really great job, and again, I could see her coming back on her show, because I think there's enough from the counseling, the feeling perspective, and maybe even on the art side of getting to the expression, what she's seeing and what she's seeing people express would be really great.
Yeah.
So I want to wrap up our show. So we are episode 25. So quarter century. We're
25.
We're now kind of hitting our rhythm, which is great. So if you want to check out more, you can go to our website, of course. So you can go to blog.guidancepointllc.com/25 or 25. So go there, and we'll have more of Bodhi's work there. Her website, she has a really great blog, and I want to make sure we plug that. So you can go to www.consciousarttherapy.com, and you can sign up for her blog there. And her business is Conscious Art Therapy is also on Facebook, so you can check that out there. But we'll put all the resources there, our transcript and resources, and a link to this show as well. But we really appreciate everyone tuning in. We know grief is not the funnest topic to go through, but again, we don't want to shy away from stuff just because it's hard, right? As we want to be able to lean into things that maybe people aren't going into. And I think this is one that I think people could use help with. Personally, we all could use help with.
Yeah.
And to just kind of have some of that conversation with someone that's an expert is really helpful. So hopefully you got some utility out of it, or maybe even you listen to it once and maybe go through something that you can come back to it and then get something out of this too. So we really appreciate you tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.